Hello kids, my name is Amanda Condit and I'm going to be showing you today a little demonstration on how to create a basic fashion illustration using a photograph. It can be a pose that you find in a fashion magazine or something you find online. You can Google fashion model or fashion pose. We're going to work from that and we're going to create a simple fashion illustration using the watercolors and other things that are in your kit. So the first thing I would like to do is review some of the supplies that are in your kit and maybe some additional supplies you might have at home that you could also use. Okay, we'll be working with watercolor today in this demo. You'll have in your kit a watercolor pad. Now some of your supplies might not be the same brand as this, but this is what you basically will have, a watercolor pad which has some nice sheets of watercolor paper. You'll have a pan of watercolors, 8 colors. From this we can mix any other color we need. The lid here is what we're going to mix in. This is the mixing pans. You'll have a kind of a fine point Sharpie. This is a permanent black marker. It has a pretty fine point on it. You will have one paintbrush. I ordered a medium size for you. Feel free, if you have other paintbrushes at home, larger and smaller, to supplement. You might want to switch sizes for different things. What you'll need from your home will be a pencil and an eraser. I like to use a mechanical pencil, but a regular number 2 pencil will be fine. You want a fairly soft eraser. You need some kind of container to hold water. I use this old soup bowl that got shipped up. You see, I've been using it for a while. It's pretty dirty. But I like it because it's white china, so I can see when my water gets dirty and I can change it. If you have a colored bowl, you can't always tell how dirty your water is. But anything will work, a glass, a plastic cup. And then you'll want either a paper towel, or I use this cotton rag because sometimes you'll want to wipe your paintbrush off. But a paper towel will work fine. I just use cotton rags because we happen to have lots of them around. So those are the things we'll be working with. Other things you might have at home that maybe we might experiment with besides what we have is you could use inks, colored inks. You could use acrylic paints, which are good for opaque things because watercolor, as you know, is transparent. Crayons add a nice texture to things, just like oil pastels. You might have some of these supplies, you might not. You don't need them, but if you have them and you want to get them out, feel free. Or chalk pastels. Both of them add a nice texture. Like say your fabric is kind of fuzzy or something, you might want to, watercolor is smooth, so if you use some of these things, they'll give a texture to your paper. Oh, I also like to keep a small scrap of paper next to me so I can test my colors. You can see I've done a lot of color testing on this. Colored pencils are great for adding detail and texture. Sometimes illustrators like to work with markers. I have a lot of permanent markers here. Some markers, like the design markers, are fairly expensive, but you can work with Sharpies or even, this is a Sanford marker. But permanent markers are nice because they don't smear like but even watercolor markers will work as long as you don't try to put watercolor on top of them, and then they'll smear. Other things, sometimes people use gel pens because a gel pen is good for adding little details, lines and stuff. Sometimes I like to use a rollerball pen to get fine lines. You have to be careful though, depending on what pen you're using. You check it first and make sure it's waterproof, because if it's not, like there, I'll lay the ink down and then I'll put some water on my brush. See, that appears to be waterproof. It doesn't smear when I put water over it. But some pens might not be waterproof, and you lay the line down and then put water on, and then they'll smear and they'll make your colors look dirty. So you want to check that out before you start using different pens, because you might want to wait until you're done with the watercolor and put the pen marks on top. So those are the things we're going to be using today, mainly the watercolor pad, the watercolor, and the brush, the marker, and a pencil. So get your stuff out and get it ready, and we're pretty much ready to start. The other thing you're going to need to do is, I told you earlier, to find a pose in a fashion magazine or online. I found this pose, which I kind of like. Be careful when you're picking a pose. If you're a beginner at this, which I'm assuming most of you are, you don't want to pick a real complicated pose. You want to pick a kind of a straightforward, straight looking at you kind of pose. If you pick something in 3/4 view, or where the model's twisted or her arms are up over her head, it's a little tricky to understand what's going on. That's better left when you have more experience. So try to find a pretty straightforward pose where the model's standing facing you, and it'll be a lot easier for this first time around. So once you have your pose and your supplies out and you're ready, we're ready to begin. Before we actually start creating our fashion illustration today, I'd like to review, for those of you that might not have had a chance to read the stuff online that explains the differences between a fashion illustration and the other kinds of illustration. I'd like to review the two different kinds of illustration you see here on the screen. The picture on the right, which is a straightforward picture of the dress, is what we call a flat sketch. A flat sketch is not designed to sell the garment or to make, create a desire for the garment or to show it off. It's a technical drawing. It's done so that the pattern maker, the sample maker, whoever needs to know the construction of the garment can actually see the construction of the garment. It's drawn in human proportions. Everything should be proportioned correctly to the way the real garment is. It has all of the details, like you'll notice the darts in the front of the dress, all the little rhinestones around the neckline. Every single rhinestone should be in the same position it actually is in the real dress. So that's what you see as a flat sketch. On the left, what you're seeing is a fashion illustration of the same garment. If you look at it, you can't necessarily see where every single rhinestone is. You don't even notice the darts in the dress. That is this particular kind of drawing, a fashion illustration, which is what we're going to be doing today. Its intent is to create a desire for the dress, to help market it or sell it to the general public. So normally a fashion illustration is going to be exaggerated. It's going to have a lot of drama and elegance. And in order to do this, we don't draw a fashion illustration strictly to human proportions. We draw it in a more exaggerated proportion. So what I have is a comparison chart that shows you the difference. On the right, the croquis figure is a human proportion, what we call human proportion. It's what you might have learned in art class if you learned how to draw a human figure in art class. The average adult human person tends to be about 7.5, maybe 8 heads tall. A head means like from your chin to the top of your head, that measurement is 1 head, and you'd like take that down the body. An adult's going to be somewhere between 7 and 8 heads tall. A fashion figure isn't drawn that way. It would tend to look a little bit short and dumpy maybe, because we're so used to seeing these long, lean figures, just like fashion models tend to be 6 foot tall and weigh 98 pounds. So the figure on the left, you see how it's elongated and stretched out? Fashion figures are oftentimes drawn 9, even 10 heads tall. It just creates a lot more drama, and that's what we're looking for in a fashion illustration. So keep that in mind. As we're drawing from this photograph, you're not copying the proportion of the photograph exactly. We're going to be using the photograph to understand how the pose works, but we'll be stretching it out and making it longer and taller than it is. And you'll notice too, a lot of the extra length is in the legs. The neck is made longer. The torso isn't a whole lot longer, maybe a little bit, but the legs are really stretched out. And so that's what we're going to be doing in the fashion illustration today. Okay, I'm going to take you through this fashion illustration in 3 basic steps. The first thing is you have to find the skeletal structure, because the framework, the bones of the body, is what holds it up and what creates the pose. You have to understand how the arm bones work, how the leg bones work, where the spine is. So that's your initial start. Then after that, you have to flesh out the form. You have to kind of, put the muscles on, show the shapes of the different limbs. And then the final step will be putting the clothing on top of the figure. You're not just copying what you see in the photograph. You're understanding how the figure is standing, the framework of it, how the muscles are, how the shapes of the limbs, and then that really will determine how the clothing lays on the figure. So then what you can do, once you understand this, you can put any dress or any outfit on this figure. You don't need to see the photograph. Once you understand how the body works, how the skeleton creates the frame, how the shape of the limbs work, then you can dress it with any garment you want. What I think you should do is watch this whole video from start to beginning, watch me do all of the steps, and then rewind it and play them, play the first step and do it stop the video do it yourself, and then go to the next step, stop the video, do it yourself, and then you can get the drawing done that way. You can rewatch any part of it as often as you like, and that will make it, I think, easier for you to do. Okay, step 1, we're going to find the skeleton on this figure. Now you can take your Sharpie marker and you can write directly on your magazine page, or if you don't want to do that and have tracing paper, you can lay a piece of tracing paper over top of it. So what I'm looking for here is, first of all, the spine, because the way the spine can curve or it can be straight. Usually in a fashion figure, it tends to be curved. In a fashion pose, oftentimes a person is standing in a somewhat exaggerated pose, and they might be standing with their weight on this, like for instance, her weight is on this leg, which means this hip is raised in the air. Oftentimes in a fashion pose, the high hip will be the low shoulder, and then the spine will curve to accommodate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the head. The head is an oval, so I'm tracing the head here. Now, keeping in mind that I want to stretch this figure out, I'm going to raise my tracing paper a little bit, and I'm going to put the neck on. The shoulders, it looks to me like they're a little bit slanted this way, so I'm going to exaggerate that a little bit because, like I said, fashion figures tend to be exaggerated. So I'll make it, I'm just putting a line in for the shoulder and the angle they are. And then the hips, same thing, they look like they're slanted this way. I'll exaggerate it slightly, which means the spine's kind of curving this way. So there's my spine. So there's shoulder, hip, spine. Then the legs are coming down from there. I want the legs to be really elongated. So this leg is holding the weight of the body. Because it's holding the weight of the body, it actually probably has to come over here a little bit more underneath the torso. So I'm just going to exaggerate this a little bit the way it is. But I'm lengthening this leg. And then the foot's here. And then this leg is pretty much just balancing. It's sort of swinging out here. I'm going to actually even make it look. So there's the other leg. Now you see how I've added length to it. I'm going to bring the shoulders back in place. This arm I'm going to hide behind the body. Oftentimes in a fashion pose, you might tuck an arm behind the body, so we're not going to even have to deal with that arm. And this arm's going to come down. Now, because I've lengthened all this a little bit, it's going to be a little longer than we're seeing here. So you have the shoulder, elbow, wrist, hips, knees, ankles. So that's your basic skeleton. Not much to it. The waist usually falls, it's not exactly in the middle. It's going to fall closer to the hip than the shoulder. I find that if I make a triangle in here like this, but I don't make the triangle straight, I curve it just like the hips, just like the spine is curved, I mean. And then do kind of an oval where the hips are. Then that gives me sort of where the waist should be, in here somewhere. Sort of a bikini bottom here. So this is how so that's the skeleton. That's all I really need for now. That's the skeleton structure. So that's what I'm going to bring over to my page. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking I might even lengthen those legs more, give it even more of a stretched out look. So here's where I need my pencil. So I'm going to just reproduce this skeleton over here. Oval head, spine curving like this, shoulder like this, hips angled like that. This leg coming pretty much straight down. The foot here, this one's going to be out here as a balancing leg. This arm's going to disappear. So that's elbow, wrist. That's pretty much my skeleton. So that's the end of step 1. Not much to it. You just might want to double check that everything looks okay. I've lengthened the neck. I've lengthened the legs. You will have a weight line coming down here that you want. Maybe I need to move this leg over a little bit so that she's really balancing herself on her weight. The torso and the head is where all the weight is, and you need some kind of balance underneath it, so that weight-bearing foot should probably be underneath it. And we'll let that one swing out, and I think that's good. So there's my skeleton. You could, a little bit here, give a little slope to the shoulder. Think about the shape of a hanger. The hanger is shaped this way for a reason, because that's how your shoulders slope. So once you have the neck, you don't like make a rounded thing here. Bring the neck straight down, and then a little slope to the shoulder. And that's your basic shape, and that's the end of step one. So that part's very simple. Okay, now we have the basic skeleton. We're gonna flesh it out and give some shape to the muscles. We're gonna do the fleshing out of the form. So I think we already had talked about doing a bit of a shoulder shape here. The neck is straight up and down. We really don't want to do this curving thing here. Straight neck and a little slope to the shoulder. The body, we've got that triangle thing going, kind of a high hip here. It's very exaggerated kind of deal, but that's okay. Fashion figures tend to be exaggerated, so we'll give our hip up here some height. Now, the arm muscles, you have to understand a little bit about what the muscles do to be able to draw this properly. The upper arm, you have muscles that attach from the shoulder to the elbow that are pretty long and pretty straight. So the upper arm doesn't really have a whole lot of shape to it. It's fairly, especially in a skinny person like a model, it's fairly straight, same width going down. Once you get to the elbow though, it's different. The muscles below the elbow, the mass of the muscle tends to be right up here close to the elbow, and then that's the large part of the muscle. And then as it gets down to the wrist, the muscles slim out and they become, tendons that attach to the wrist bone. So it's like this elongated teardrop shape, a little bit of a bulge here right under the elbow, getting skinnier as it comes down. I'm not going to worry about drawing the hand. Hands are pretty complicated, and for a beginner, I encourage beginners to hide the hands, like we'll hide her hand behind her thigh here, and that's fine. Legs are very similar to the arms. The upper leg, let's mark where the knees are about here. The upper leg tends to be a little bit more straight because of the long muscles. It'll be a little wider at the top of the thigh, but there's not a whole lot of shape or bulge going on there. Then you have the knee, and then the lower leg is much like the lower arm. If you look at her lower leg here, you have kind of a bulge here where the bulk of the muscles are. They slim down to where they're reaching the ankle. They're just the tendons attached to the ankle. And I'm going to exaggerate that even more, give her skinny legs with a nice calf here. These are the calf muscles. They're kind of large, and so once again, that kind of teardrop shape. But as it comes down to the ankle, it's going to slim down to next to nothing because we have those tendons attaching to the ankle there. There's the one foot, there's the other foot. Because she's wearing high heels and her toes are kind of pointing at us, you see the flat at the bottom here, so I'm just going to show it that way, flat here. So there's the shape of her legs. And like I said, I'm going to tuck this arm behind the body here and hide it. So that's pretty much it. We've fleshed out the shape of the body. Because this leg is kind of curving out, you don't really see this hip so much. It kind of juts out like that. This is the hip that we're really seeing, that's the exaggeration of. So you see nice long legs. We have the shape of the muscles here. We pretty much know what's happening. You could put any clothing on her. We're going to use this dress, but you could really put any clothing on her that you wanted to. Okay, so step 3 is going to be actually to put the clothing on. Now that we see what's happening with the body, we can tell even where the wrinkles and the folds will be. So this dress, I'm going to take a minute to look at it. It's always good, no matter what you're doing, to kind of observe what you're drawing before you actually go to draw it. Try to understand it with your brain before you put it on the paper. So what do we have here? We have a one-shouldered dress, so it goes from and always think about where it hits the body, like it goes from under her armpit to the base of her neck pretty much here. So we want to have that That's the angle it's at. It looks like it's fairly slim to the body here, probably slim to the body here because of this overhanging thing in the front. We don't see that, but you can see how it's sort of hugging her body on this side, so I will let it hug her body on this side. How short is it? Well, from her hip to her knee, it looks like it's slightly more than halfway down. It's well above her kneecaps, so it's maybe somewhere in here. I put it in here maybe. Because of the fact that this hip is so much higher, the hem actually might a little bit curve up on that side. Not an awful lot because there's not much difference in the knees here, but I would give it a little bit of a going up there. And I'm going to wrap the hem a little bit around the legs here, so kind of get a little curve. So it's tight to the body there. Not so much tight on this side. There's a little bit away from the body. And now we don't know what's happening underneath here. I'm assuming it's tight, but I'm not going to worry about that because we're going to cover it with this scarfy thing. You have the gold stripe here, and you have a couple of folds here. Looks like there's some kind of a fold right here, which I'm going to show. Looks like that's level across the, and actually it's a little lower on this side. So you see from here to here is shorter than here to here, so that actually slopes down. I'm not sure what exactly it is, a little. And then we have this thing. Now this looks a little awkward to me. It's you always try to, first of all, you kind of simplify things. If there's wrinkles that don't really show what's happening, you don't want to really put them in there. But you want things to look graceful and flowing. So I'm going to kind of give this a nice smooth curve. And see how the end of this ends right exactly at that line there. That's a little bit awkward. I think, and since this is a loose scarf, it could probably be raised or lowered a little bit. I'm going to bring it down below that line a little so it doesn't like lay right on the same line as this. So let's say here's the scarf. It does hang out over her shoulder. It's going to have a little bit of a fold here, I think, where it, so that's what I would do with the scarf. And I might even like, you know, kind of give it a little flowing on the end like that. And then there's that gold on the end of the scarf. So that's really all I need to know about the clothing. I think that works. I'm going to give her a little bit of a face. Now I'm going to do another video after this one that is how to draw faces. So I won't get into a lot of detail here, but I kind of rule the, you know, in half down the center and half this way, and that's how I know where to place my eyes. I'm not putting a lot of detail for the face because we're not selling the face, we're selling the garment. I like the way her hair is kind of, I'm going to exaggerate that a little bit, let it flow out to the side like that. I like that. And then you don't see much on this side. So that's all I really need for now. That's the end of the clothing and stuff. So that the final step is going to be to actually do it in marker and watercolor. The thing you have to remember is you have to erase your pencil before you put the watercolor down, because once you put watercolor on top of the pencil, you can't erase it. So I think what I'm going to do is do some marker outlines first, and then I'll be able to erase my pencil, and then I can fill in with watercolor. So let's see. Sharpie marker. I'd like the lines to be graceful and kind of flowing, so here's the shoulder. We'll come down around the arm. And then we don't want like a lot of sketchiness, I don't think. I think I'd like the lines to be kind of smooth, so I'm trying to be careful how I draw them here. And let's see, this is where that edge was, so I'm going to show that. And then this is where the skirt comes over like this. I'm going to do the scarf on top before I draw the underneath. I'm going to go off the shoulder here. I'm going to put a little fold in it here so it makes sense what it's doing. And then we have the now I'm not going to put a black outline on the edge of that gold stripe because I don't want it to be so prominent. I'm just going to paint that in. I'm just putting, you know, black where there's actual edges of things. So there we go. And now See, I'm showing a little indent at the underneath the knee, but I'm not gonna do I'm not gonna do all that wrinkly stuff on the knee. Okay, so you don't want to draw the whole oval because you want to, you don't want it to show through the hair. So I'm going to put the hair on first, and this side of the face is okay because there is no hair on this side. For an ear. And I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna really do a lot of definition for the face. I'm not gonna put black marks for the nose and the lips because I don't want that to be big black marks. I'm gonna do that with the watercolor. Or you could do it with marker or whatever. So there I have the basic outline. Now I'm gonna take my eraser and erase my pencil because I don't want those messy pencil lines to show after I have my watercolor on. I think I have her eyes very crooked there, but cover some eyebrows. All right, so for those of you that haven't used watercolor before, what I like to do is, it takes, these are called semi-moist. They're actually, if you tried to paint with them instantly, you wouldn't get a lot of color. So what I like to do is, you need a moment for the pigment to dissolve. So I like to put just a couple dabs of water on the ones I know I'm going to use. I'm not sure what I'm going to use, so I'm just going to put some on all of them. And once the water sits on there for a few minutes, it starts dissolving the pigment. You get nice rich color. So to get some kind of a flesh tone, okay, she's got like a medium flesh tone, nothing too dark, but she's not real pale either. Oftentimes you can just get what you need by taking some orange, if it's a white or a Latino person, and just adding water. If it looks too orange, then maybe let's throw a dab of blue in. There we go, we toned it down. So there's a nice sort of white-skinned person color. You'll notice I'm not filling everything in. I'm just kind of keeping it loose and just putting some color on here very loosely. I also don't want to overemphasize her body because it's really the garment that we want to sell. So I just get a little color on there. Now, I could actually even use a little brown for shadow. I might want to, just to do a little bit of shadow, maybe under the knee, a little shadow here under where the hem would have a shadow on the leg. Looks like there's some shadow under her neck, maybe inside her arm. The watercolor is wet, so it's bleeding, but I like that kind of loose look that I'm getting here. So I'm gonna let it go. So that might be, now if the color bleeds where you don't want it to, this is where you can use your rag here, clean your brush, dry it, and you can actually lift up color. With a clean, dry brush, you can take the color off. So I didn't want that brown going into her face there. So that's just a little trick. Okay, next I need that yellow color. Now I don't know if this yellow is probably just going to be too bright. It looks like it's kind of a goldish color, so maybe I will try throwing just a little dab of orange in. I think that's the kind of yellow gold we have going there. So I'm going to put that stripe in. And the stripe at the bottom of the scarf here. I'm going to do some hair. It looks like her hair is pretty dark brown, so I'll start with some brown. Usually always the hair inside, the hair on the top will have highlights and be lighter. And back in here where you're looking at the hair, it's really in the shadow behind her neck is going to be the darkest. So that's where I'll give my darkest brown. And as I go up to the top, I'm going to get a little more water, make it a little lighter. Just want a loose flowing look here. Okay, so I should wait for this to dry, because if you see what happened now, the brown from her hair has really gone into her neck. So once again, I'm cleaning my brush, and I can lift that up. While it's wet, I can lift it right off. Even when it's dry, you can lift it somewhat. It can be a little bit darker there because there is shadow under her neck, but that was way too dark. So now we have some shadows in the garment to make it look realistic. It's a white garment. It would have a gray shadow, maybe with a touch of blue. Here's the black. That's going to be way too dark, so we need lots of water, only a little bit of paint, and I think just a tad of blue to brighten up the shadow maybe. Now here's where I'm going to test it, just make sure I don't have it too dark on my test sheet. Yeah, I think that'll be a nice shadow. So it looks like we may have a little shadow. Oh no, actually it is a little too dark, isn't it? I mean, it's okay for there, but I don't want to get too dark with it all over. So I'm going to add a little more water. When it's too dark, you just add more water. Now let me see. That's later. So here's some shadow in the scarf. I'm bleeding into the yellow there because I'm not being very patient and letting this dry. So these shadows across here, I'm just doing with the paint. I didn't draw them in with a marker. And a lot of shadow under here, underneath the. You notice how the shadows kind of show the way the dress is stretching, like from her hip down. So the shadows can indicate the form of something too. So that's probably all I really need there. Because the paints were still wet, the yellow is bleeding into the shadow, the brown, but I kind of like that. I kind of like that. That doesn't bother me at all. This is, it's supposed to be a very loose, casual kind of just lightening up some of this shadow area a little. Okay, I don't know if her face is dry enough for me to, no it's not. Okay, I ran out of space on my phone, but that's okay because it gave this a chance to dry, so now I can show you how I'm going to finish this. I think now that it's dry, I might want to actually accentuate some of these shadows a little bit. I still have these paints over here that I used. This was what I was using for shadow. So let me just make sure I get some shadow under her neck. I'm going to put a little shadow in her face. Just a little shadow under the nose here, indicate where the nose is. Let me see, a little shadow at the inside of the arm. I like this shadow under the. We get a little bit of shadow in around the knee area, just so you can tell that there are some knees there. Maybe down the side of the leg. All right, and then also maybe a little more shadow on the dress. So there was definitely some wrinkles in there, so I'm going to show them. And I think I want to make it a little stronger here where the shadow is under the scarf. I'd like to show something of the shoes here. I don't want to get too carried away, so maybe I'll just use this gray. Show that there's an ankle strap here. Crossing over here. Okay, I think I need a little bit of the skin tone here to show that that's her foot. Okay, I need some red lips. So I'll get some nice red here. And I'm just gonna show the lip shape. And if I was really careful, I might be able to even get a little bit of pink in the cheeks without getting carried away. Oops, don't want to get carried away. Yes. Okay. I think that's it. I'm going to call it done. So it's just a kind of gestural. It's not real. I said I'm done, but here I am fine-tuning. So it's not, you know, fashion illustrations aren't meant to be a realistic artwork. They should have life and action and, you know, be kind of loose and, oops, that's a little too dark. I'm going to quit before I get too carried away here. Maybe I'll just give her, I think that's it. I'm going to call it done. Well, you know what? I think that the nose kind of disappeared just a little bit. There we go. Oh, and maybe I actually also need just a wee bit more definition on the shoes. But this you could do with marker, or you could do with colored pencil. You know, if you don't feel comfortable trying to do these kind of lines with the brush, then that's where you might move into the colored pencil, or with the shadowing, you might have taken the color pencil and put that for the shadow rather than the brush work. I like working with the brush, so I did the whole thing with the brush. So that's it. That's a basic fashion illustration. Like I said, you can go back and you know, look at this one step at a time, stop the video, work on that step, and then when you feel like you have that step done, start the video, watch the next step, work on that step. You can watch each step as often as you need to, and go for it. You can do this same figure if it's easier for you, or you can pick your own. Like I said, find one from Google or from a fashion magazine. So good luck, have fun.